I'm Jacqueline Craig. I am a member of the Bounce Executive Committee. We're thrilled to have you all here joining us today. This is our ground rounds. Our topic today is the inequity of trauma and adverse childhood experiences. We are super excited to have Joe Cruz and Carol Frame from In Without with us today. We have Lee Johnson here with us today as well. So it's a full and robust schedule. I'm going to start by introducing Joe and Carol, but actually first I'm going to introduce Kelly Pullen to you. Kelly is one of our sponsors today, and so she's going to say a few words, and then we'll jump in to our program.
Hey everyone, good morning. I'm Kelly Pullen. I'm the Executive Director of the SCI program at Aetna Better Health of Kentucky, and it's my pleasure to be able to welcome you all to the Bounce Grand Rounds today. It's lovely to see you all here. As you're aware, the people that we serve who are affected by trauma face unique and a complex web of challenges. And many times these challenges can stump even the most well-intentioned programs or systems that are designed to help them. And this is exactly why groups like the Bounce Coalition exist, to create trauma-informed communities that not only recognize the challenges that we face, but actively seek to overcome those challenges through unity and innovation. Today, we're here to help bridge gaps and eliminate silos. We will encourage innovative thinking, we'll promote practical solutions, and above all, we're here to challenge that status quo. Today, we hope that you all leave not only with a better understanding of our shared challenges in this state, but also with decisive and actionable strategies. This isn't just about planning for the immediate future. This is about fostering a sustainable model of cooperation and also mutual support that will continue to help the communities that we serve. So we're so thankful that you all joined us today, and let's get to work.
Thank you so much to Kelly and to Aetna for their support. So again, Joe Cruz and Carol Frame are with us today. They are with In Without, which is a nonprofit organization that's committed to helping healers heal. They facilitate meaningful experiences that foster reflection, create connection, and inspire action so that providers can find and sustain wellness and then more effectively serve others. Their vision is to create healthy cycles so that our community values healing, justice, and equity for all. And as a member of a provider organization, I cannot wait to hear everything that you are going to share with us today. So Joe and Carol, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We'll pull up the slide deck really quickly, but welcome. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. And we want to thank you for putting effort and energy into your own education around the inequities of trauma and ACEs. So we're going to get right into the run of, we have a short run of show, so we want to get right into it. So this is the inequity of trauma and ACEs, and we will go directly to the agenda. All right, so Carol's going to give us a trauma and ACEs review. I'm going to talk a little bit about inequity of trauma. We'll talk about some healing-centered engagement and then do a couple of resilience activities. And then when we come back at the very end, we're going to talk about other ways that we can build on resilience. I'm going to go ahead on and turn it over to Carol.
So we can go to the next slide. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start out with just some basic questions. Most folks are familiar with trauma and adverse childhood experiences, but we just want to make sure we're all starting out with nice shared language. So I'm going to reverse these questions. What is trauma? And you can unmute or you can share in the chat box a couple of words or phrases to answer that question. What is trauma?
Stressful activity.
A stressful activity? Did I get that right?
Yeah, a stressful action or activity.
Yes, stress is definitely connected with trauma. Thank you. let's have a couple of other answers. Something that distresses and brings up anxiety in a person for any reason. Yeah, trauma varies widely from person to person, and different people experience the same events differently, depending on a whole host of variables. Anything that causes significant physical or emotional harm to a person, scary events that leave a long impact. In simple terms, a bad event. Yeah, sometimes, Michael, it's nice just to keep it simple. Stressful experiences. Yes, yes, and yes. So, interestingly, the Greek word for trauma is wound. And I really like that connected with the word trauma. A wound refers to a physical or an emotional energy and the long term impact of that. So we experience trauma when we experience some type of stressful event or some type of stress that overwhelms our capacity to manage it. And it's in that overwhelm that our brain, body, and behavior can be impacted, and we can have those long-term negative impacts that we're trying to avoid. What about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? What are a few definitions or examples of those? What are some phrases to describe what an adverse childhood experience is? I love your all's responses in the chat box. A lot of people got in there and responded to my question about trauma. So let's see the same thing for adverse childhood experiences. Bullying is an example of an adverse childhood experience, definitely. And yeah, ACEs, neglect, abuse, household dysfunction, molestation, incarcerated parents, divorce, parent in jail. So we have all kinds of examples here, threats and neglect of adverse childhood experiences. So when we think about ACEs, we're thinking about those traumatic experiences that children have before the age of 18 that have long-lasting impacts on their health. So they experience stressful or traumatic events that impact or change their brain, their body, and then their behavior. And we know, everybody knows, that there is a link between number of ACEs and adult onset of chronic disease, mental illness, and violence. So we know that what happens in childhood makes a difference and can impact us over time. We can go to the next slide. I really like this visual on this next slide. I think it expands our understanding of ACEs. So this is the 3 realms of ACEs. And what we usually think about when we think of ACEs are what's in the tree, the household ACEs. So you can see there, and we named a lot of these already: divorce, incarcerated family member, physical and emotional neglect. So these are the adverse childhood experiences that, as providers, we're working with our clients who have experienced these types of trauma in their lives, and we're trying to help them move towards the healing process. However, with this model, we also back up into more of the inequities or the system piece that we're going to be talking about. So if you look at number 2, communal trauma, this is trauma that might be experienced on a more collective level. Historical trauma, discrimination, poverty, structural racism, poor water and air quality, food scarcity would be another example. So we're looking at the tree as an individual we're serving, but what's in the soil? What are the roots growing in? What historically or what systemically is happening that may or may not be nurturing that tree? And then, of course, the third realm is environment. So what's happening outside of household and community that impacts household and community? And the one that we're all most familiar with is the pandemic, of course, but there are others on here as well, the climate crisis, and there are examples under that. And then the environmental natural disasters. And thank you, Regina, for chiming in that you love this visual. I do too. I really think it fills out the different types of trauma that not only children and individuals and families face, but that communities and organizations face as well. We can go on to the next slide. I'm going to kick this back over to Joe.
Thank you, Carol. So as we can see, all groups have adverse childhood experiences, right? But not in equal numbers. So what groups do you think are more likely to have experienced ACEs? Go ahead and throw it in the chat box, or if you would like to unmute. Yes. Okay. So we've got minorities, African American, marginalized. Yes, I like that. Yeah. See, now they're coming in. Okay. Poverty, immigrants, refugees, people of color, lower socioeconomic status, right? So yeah, let's move to the next slide. Because many of the populations that you all mentioned are listed here, right? And they're reported as experiencing significantly more ACEs. So we've got Black, Latinx, people making less than 15K a year, LGBTQ community, and let's not talk about intersectionality, right? So if you are one or more of these things, it can potentially boost your number of ACEs, right? But why? Why are these people experiencing ACEs on a higher level? Throw that in the chat box. Why are these groups of people experiencing higher levels of ACEs? And you can go to the next slide as well. So environment. Less access to help, okay? Vulnerable. What else? Discrimination, yeah. Finances. Family stress, income. Additionally, so like that slide showed those 3 realms of ACEs. Sorry, excuse me. There we go. Systemic racism, white supremacy culture, things of that nature. These systems that are set in place, historical inequities. Yeah, now we're going around the right place. There are so many different systems that are set in place, right? And this is one of the examples of a system that that takes place in Louisville, Kentucky. So this is from the Health Equity Center. And this is a map of Kentucky. I mean, I'm sorry, not Kentucky, of Louisville, that shows our life expectancy, right? So I don't know if you can see it, but that really dark green area is the Times Sawyer Park area, the top tip. And the kind of off-whitish color on the left-hand side, that's Shawnee Park. And between those two, it's like less than a 30-minute drive, but the life expectancy can have a difference of up to 13 years. And you can put maps like this one from the Center of Health Equity on top of each other, and you can see the food deserts, and you can see the lack of access or the lack of resources and things of that nature. So we know that these inequities exist, and they have existed for long periods of times within the systems that are set in place. But what we want to let you know is that there is hope, right? We're going to experience the trauma. We're going to experience the stressors no matter what. But we're going to go ahead on and shift into healing-centered engagement. So we're going to give you a couple of practices. We're going to talk a little bit about healing-centered engagement and do a couple of practices for ourselves. So go ahead on to the next slide, and Carol, shift it back over to you.
Yeah, so we're moving through this quickly. We could spend hours looking at some of these visuals that we've shared this morning, but we have 20 minutes just to do a quick inequities exist. Here are the groups who are most impacted. What are some reasons why? And now we're shifting gears to healing is possible, like Joe was talking about. So we know we can build resilience with individuals, families, organizations, systems, and across communities. And Joe and I really like this model, healing-centered engagement. So we just want to take a quick peek at one model that addresses inequities. It was created by Dr. Sean Jenright, and I love to tell the story. Dr. Jenright is a clinician who was working with incarcerated youth, and he was describing to them some of the information that we've already looked at in the last few minutes. He was describing to them adverse childhood experiences and how they can have a long-term negative impact on folks' mental and physical health. And one of the youth stopped him in real time and said, "Hold up." Basically, he gave him some pushback. "I don't like what you're saying, Dr. Jenright." And he said, "I am more than what happened to me." And that was a real pivotal turning point for Dr. Jenright, because he heard that youth say that. And he understood that this information around trauma and the long-term impact is challenging information. And there must be a way to embolden and empower people to be more than what has happened to them in their past. And out of that grew healing-centered engagement. And we hope that we are intriguing you or creating some curiosity so that you'll look this up and get more information about it after this webinar this morning, because it's a really rich model. But we wanted to give you 5 parts of it to kind of increase your interest. So the 5 parts of healing-centered engagement can be called CARMA, C-A-R-M-A, culture, agency, relationship, meaning, and aspiration. So culture, we are never separate from our culture. So culture is what anchors us in the awareness of ourselves and our collective humanity. It anchors us in our history and creates a sense of belonging. And so part of the healing process is honoring culture. Agency is what equips us as individuals and collectively and as providers to address the underlying issues that create trauma and figure out ways to shift those on a systemic level. Relationships, we all know this work is all relational. We're harmed in relationships and we're also healed in relationships. So we cannot take the relational piece out of this work. Meaning is remembering our purpose. And hopefully this morning you're getting a reminder of your purpose around why you do the work you do and the importance of the work that you do. And then I love aspirations because it says setting goals, but it's really about collectively dreaming together, leaning into our hope and believing that we can make a difference in this world for individuals, families, communities, and even changing those systems. So this is an example of a model, but we know also that we can't do this kind of healing work unless we as individuals are focused on our own healing. So we're going to move to the next slide with an opportunity for us to do a little bit of resilience work.
Mhm. And we're going to start with getting into our own bodies. Okay. So what I would like you all to do is to take your hands and you're just going to rub them together. Okay. You're going to rub them together like this. You might do a little of this, right? And you're going to make them warm. Okay. It's kind of feeling. My fingertips are cold, right? I don't know if you're like me, you might have on shorts because it's hot outside, right? So my fingertips are a little cold. So we're gonna warm our hands up, and then I want you to put it on a bare area of your body. So maybe your face, maybe your knees, maybe your arms, and just feel the warmth that you've generated. And if you haven't generated enough, yeah, you can go ahead on and warm it up a little bit more, and just be in your body right now, right? Mm. Mm. We don't take enough pauses throughout our day and we don't take enough time. Sometimes it just takes 30 seconds to get into our own bodies, right? And so we want to do practices that remind us to practice mindfulness, right? That get us into ourselves and remind us that we have resources within ourselves, right? Um, Carol, do you want to do a breathing or the 20s?
Sure.
Or do you want to do
Yeah.
breathing and then I can do 20s?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So by the way, everyone, the latest and greatest research around spending time in front of technology says that we should take a break every 20 minutes. Can you imagine taking a break from your laptop every 20 minutes and do what is called a movement snack? So I share that to say that
Carol, they're all laughing at you. They're
they're,
laughing at you
they're
with this
laughing,
20 minutes. They're
laughing at
laughing
me
at
every
you.
20 minutes. We're doing it this morning. We're presented for about 20 minutes, and now we're doing this. This is a movement snack where you're reminding yourself that you're more than what's in your head and you're more than the technology in front of you. We also have bodies, and we are reminding ourselves of that. And we touch our face. It's just a moment of self-kindness. And then we can operate out of that type of healing, and it helps us show up in other spaces in healing ways. I didn't see that everybody was laughing about that, Joe. So yeah, I am going to do, we decided to do some hands since we're all on Zoom together and we can see heads, but we can see hands if you hold them up. We decided to do a couple of different resilient practices having to do with hands. So another one is really simple, and it has to do with slowing your breath. And what you do is you take one finger and you trace your fingers on your other hand, starting with your thumb and all the way through, and you breathe in when you go up and you breathe out when you go down. And you don't want to do it like this, right? Okay, that's where we might start. You might start and you're kind of in an activated space. You want to slow your breathing. And even the icing on the cake is to notice that in between the in breath and the out breath, there's a pause. So I can breathe in and there's a pause before I breathe in. And there's a pause again. And so give yourself a movement snack during the day. Take a break from your work, from your technology, from your clients, and just trace your fingers with this very simple finger breathing technique. And then you can trace back and give yourself a moment of calm, a moment to notice breath, and a moment to notice how your finger feels as it's tracing your fingers on your other hand. And Joe, you want to do a final one?
Sure. All right. So this last one is one of the 20s. It's called the 20s. And actually, we didn't talk about the vagus nerve, but this is a vagus nerve practice. So if you don't know what the vagus nerve is, we would like to challenge you to do some research and learn a little bit about it. But this is one of those practices. So another hand, right? But you can do this with your ankles and your feet as well. But sometimes stress and tension get stuck in our joints, right? And what we're going to do is you're going to gently, and sometimes when we do exercises, we get like rough with our bodies. We want to be gentle with our bodies, okay? So you're going to gently roll your wrists in one direction, okay? And they're called 20s because you're going to do it 20 times in one direction. That's why I say gently, because you probably have knuckles cracking and wrist is popping and all sorts of things going on because this doesn't happen very often, right? But you're going to go 20. We're at about 15. Well, I'm at about 15. And then once you get to your 20, then you're going to reverse it and go in the opposite direction, right? And we're going to get some of that tension and that stress out of our wrists and our hands. And like I said, you can do this with your feet, right? So you can do 20 in one direction with your feet and then 20 in the other direction. And this just helps us to release, right? Release some of that stress, release some of that trauma that is stuck in our joints. So as we go through the next session, go ahead on and try to do it with your ankles and get some more tension out down below. We want to thank you for being a part of this. When we come back, we're going to ask you, we're going to do a commitment to action. And we're going to ask you to commit to doing something to combat the inequities of trauma and ACEs in your life and in the communities around you. So we want to thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Jacqueline to introduce the next person. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I'm going to do the wrist thing all the time now. That felt really good. I'm thrilled to get to introduce to you for the next segment of our presentation, Lee Johnson. Lee is a 25-year-old young person who's joined us. She works as a classroom assistant through AmeriCorps, and she's also a part of Reform Louisville, which is a group of young adults advocating for Kentucky's young people. And so, Lee, how are you doing today?
Hi, everyone. We're having a couple of technical issues with getting Lee on. So we're going to take a few minutes to answer any questions that you all may have for Carol and Joe or the Bounce Coalition. We're happy to answer those. But yeah, it'll be just a few minutes.
Okay. So anyone have any questions for Carol and Joe for this first piece of the presentation, or anything you particularly enjoyed, or you feel free to come off mute or to put the question in the chat, and I'll try to monitor that.
I will say thank you for reinforcing what I do during the day. Sometimes is try to get up and get away from this box because I spend a lot of time paperwork and online and this and that, and having someone else to affirm, because sometimes my coworkers like, oh, we got to get this done and I got to do this, I got to do that. And I'm like, I know, but my eyeballs are doing something weird. No. But yeah, something else to do with my hands and get up.
Thank you for that, Audrey. We were going to mention, so one of the people that we like to mention to people is Trisha Hersey, and she is with the NAP ministry, and they use rest as resistance to our grind culture. Our culture, is deeply embedded in grind, go, do, be, right? And so Trisha Hersey tells us to sit, be, rest. And when I say rest, I don't mean go to sleep. Do that also, right? But rest your body, rest your mind, rest your heart, rest, and don't be a part of grind culture so much throughout the day. So kudos to you for doing it for your own body.
Absolutely. When I share that research about movement snacks about every 20 minutes, it doesn't mean every 20 minutes we're doing a high intensity prepping for a marathon. It is doing what feels good to our body and taking a break. It could be the 20s. It could be sitting with eyes closed and just listening to our own breathing. It could be just walking around for 10 minutes and doing some stretching, all of those types of activities. Research shows, this is research based, make a really big difference long term on our emotional and mental health. So I don't know if you're like me, but around 2 o'clock every afternoon, if I've been in front of the computer, I feel all out of sorts. And that's my body saying that my nervous system is done and I need to get up and move and do something different. And when I return, I'm going to be in a better place mentally and physically and better able to do the work that's so important.
We had a question.
Anybody?
Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead,
Go
Karen.
ahead, Joe.
We had a question in the chat box. Do we have any more? That's what our organization is all about, right? All we have is no, not all we have, but we have a significant amount of exercises and strategies. I was gonna say one other one we can do while we're waiting, if you would like to. It's called 5 4 3 2 1. And you've probably heard of it before. It's a mindfulness activity and it deals with the senses. So if you're heightened or if something is happening and you need to be grounded or be brought back into yourself or into your space, you look for 5 things that you can see around the room, right? And so you look, and I like to look at things that are aesthetically pleasing, right? So I look for things that kind of bring me joy or have a lot of color or pop, right? So 5 things that you can see. Then you go into 4 things that you can hear, right? Sometimes you can hear the light, sometimes you can hear your air, sometimes, you're breathing, right? Then you go into 3 things that you can touch. I like to touch if I have jeans on because of the texture, right? So I look for textures. 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. So you go through your senses. And sometimes if you're working with youth, you can even say, I want you to name 5 things that are purple, 4 things that are blue, 3 things that are green, just kind of go through the colors and make it a little bit more simplistic, but it brings you back into the space that you're in and reminds you that you are calm. Sometimes when we are activated, we go into that fight or flight, and we flip our lid. If you don't know what that is, you can look up the hand brain model, Dan Siegel, but we go directly into fight or flight mode. And we have to remind ourselves that we are safe. And we can do that through breathing and through just being in our space. Somebody says, I use 5 4 3 2 1 a lot with students. This tends to bring them back and help them to calm and think clearly. Yeah. And it's good for us as well. We need it sometimes too.
I just want to elevate your comment, Amber, in the chat box. I think it's really important. Amber shared, I think these are so helpful for so many reasons, especially if the work you do often takes you back to your own trauma and your own ACEs. And we know that a lot of folks come into this work out of an experience of adverse childhood experiences. And part of what we're doing is healing ourselves as we work to heal the clients that we serve. And so, yeah, we need to make sure we're grounded in these healing practices. And that goes for working through our own trauma as well as secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma, burnout. When we're listening to stories of trauma throughout the day, we can start to absorb those. And it makes it even more important for us to commit to these resilience practices that help us stay grounded. Now, Tina, Joe, and I can go on for the rest of this workshop because we have plenty to say, and we'll invite others to join us in a conversation. But I want to check in with you and see if we still have some more time or where we are with the tech issues.
Looks like Lee has joined us. So we thank you, Carol and Joe, for your time and your extended time. And it does sound like you could keep going, but we are going to switch over to Lee now. So as a reminder, Lee is with us today, and she is with, well, she wears multiple hats, I can tell you, but today she's here as a member of Reform Louisville, which is a group of young adults that advocate for Kentucky's young people. So Lee, welcome. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great today. First day back to work. Our kids graduated last week, so no kids today.
Okay. And I see, so I see we have Lee's slide up here, and I had some questions to go through, I believe, with Lee. Lee, are you going to speak first, and then I have the questions? Sorry. Let me check my notes here. Just want to make sure we're doing the right thing. So,
I think it's better for me to respond after I'm being asked a question.
Okay, great. So Lee, go ahead and tell us a little bit, for those of you, we did this the last time. We had somebody who was sort of representing more lived experience, and so that's Lee is here to share that. So the first question I have for Lee is for Lee to tell us a little bit about how you and your family have been impacted by the justice system.
Well, I didn't meet my dad till I was 5 because he was incarcerated. So that took away a little bit. But my mom, she got in a fight, and I guess she went down to take an EPO, but the girl had already did it. Basically, she was gone for 9 days. She was on the watch for 13. And just having that feeling of and I've only got to talk to her one time the whole time she was in there. So having to be somebody else's responsibility, and you can tell like the person I was with, their kids were grown out of the house, so you can tell they've been doing what they wanted to do for a long time. So it was me and both of my siblings. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, but basically we had to learn how to catch the target because my grandma, she lived in Beach Terrace, and that's where we were staying at, in this 1 bedroom. Really not understanding. I was really trying to understand like why she was in there, like the situation. But me only being 11, 12 years old, nobody was really trying to tell me anything. But I still had to make sure my brother and sister caught the bus to get to school, and then I got to worry about myself. It was just like, for me, it was an experience of like growing up a little bit. So then my mom got in a wreck, and she moved back with my grandma, and I just had to figure it out. So yeah, just like I feel like after that, it was just like a downfall, and my mom was just going through a lot, and I had to step up a little bit to be an adult. I thank her for that, though. I thank God for the experience, because if I wouldn't have, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. I would have a story.
What and so you've just spoken a little bit about this, but as what happened as a result of your parents being incarcerated? So you just spoke about having to grow up faster and take on more responsibility, you know, learning life skills that some of us maybe still don't have, quite frankly. What other impact did your parents being incarcerated have on you and your family?
Um, well, I can't say with my dad. It took me a little minute to even open up to him because I'm like, I don't know him. I remember my mom dropping me off over there to them. My grandma's, I love them, even from when I first, but I didn't know them. So just like, I was kind of standoffish. I still kind of am to this day because I feel like if they don't try to get to know me, what's the point of me trying to get to know them a little bit? But the situation with my mom, I just remember not feeling as much love as I do from my parent. I remember sitting at the park just crying because I'm like, I just need to talk to my mom. Just know, just those little life situations, and I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone else but her because that was the only person I really had. So her being taken away from me and my siblings, it was just like, what do we do now? And not knowing when she was coming home, even though it wasn't that long, but 9 days being away. And I mean, when she did the watch, it was better because she was home, but we didn't have a ride over there to see her all the time. So we was still living in this 1 bedroom with my grandma. You know, it was kind of bad. It was kind of bad, but um,
So, so we've been talking, you know, the previous presentation was was around adverse childhood experiences and the long-term impacts that the stress and trauma of these adverse childhood experiences, which you certainly encountered. So what for you personally, what would you say the long-term changes for you were as a result of the stress and trauma that you went through?
I really think it was like the trust, because I really didn't have anybody. I don't open up to a lot of people, so that's kind of hard still to this day. Uh, and really just talking to people. You know, you don't have that support or that one person that actually that you know got your back. It's just I still have trouble. Yeah, that's probably the main one.
And then on the flip side of that, because we do spend a lot of time talking about adverse childhood experiences and stress and trauma, but what would you say, you mentioned, you alluded to it with like, you're in some ways grateful for going through that because it's put you where you are today. So what are some of the things that you did to build resilience to overcome some of those initial adverse experiences?
Um, I really just that's a lot because it's just okay. Because I stay to myself a lot and I deal with things by myself. So I think not being because when I was younger, I was a wild kid, and but I think that was part of me being angry. But when I found out, like I don't have to be like this all the time. Like I can write my own. I can write my own destiny. Like it's just really trying to be humble and taking experiences and making them like worth the while. Like this is why I went through it. It's okay. You're going like just life experiences really like that. That really took a toll on me a little bit. I think. See, this is why I'm thankful for Reform Louisville and KYA because even when I started them, I did not talk in the meetings. I was just, but Miss Tara, Miss Crystal, like they just like warming and it's just like I don't know. They make me they make me want to talk and they make me want to tell my story to other people. And then all the stuff that I have been through and the stuff that I have did, I know I want to other people to know like y'all can do it. Like y'all can be anything y'all want. It doesn't matter what you've been through.
Well, yeah, it sounds to me like building some positive, trusting relationships really empowered you. And now I know that you're somebody who now kind of passes that on to others and empowers other people who've been through similar experience. So you're now the trustworthy person for other people. So and obviously folks trust you. They pick you to speak at all these amazing presentations and that sort of thing. So
Yes, yesterday we got to talk in Frankfurt about incarcerating parents, and I was just really trying to see what they do in different counties because in our county we can't pick the jailer. I did not know that. Like we don't vote on that, but in other counties they do. So they do different stuff. Like they can read books with their children. Like we didn't get to do any of it. Like I don't think we went to go see her. I talked to my mom one time. That was it. I didn't talk to my dad till he was out of jail, and my mom wanted me to meet him.
well, it's interesting you say that. That's the next question I have for you is where some of the inequities in the system have played into your experiences. You've had the opportunity now to interact with folks statewide and see how different counties, different areas handle things. So what are some of the inequities that you feel like you've experienced?
A lot. It's a lot. Mm, I'm not. I'm really trying to get my words together. Hold on. Sorry.
Take your time. Take your time.
I'm not sure how to really explain this. Mm. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that to me again?
Yeah, just how if you feel like there were areas where inequities or played into your experience. So you mentioned out in some of the other counties that people can choose, maybe have more choices in the system than your family did in Jefferson County, for example, or they maybe got more time or visits with family members than you were able to get. So did you, and if you didn't experience any of that, that's fine too, but we're just curious if reflecting back, did you feel like there was any time that the system was just not equitable for you and your family?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because we really didn't get like it kind of separated us because in the same thing, my brother was kind of taken away in that situation. It was like a little situation. So basically we didn't get to be together a lot. And I didn't understand, like, nobody explained to me what was going on with my mom. Like, and when she got the day she got locked up, my cousin was with her, my older cousin, and it was just like she didn't even know what was going on. So it was like they didn't even explain to her why she was going.
Mhm.
It was just a lot, kind of.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of stuff going on, really.
Yeah,
And you know, like
lack
with
of
someone else's house, you don't get the freedom as you would at home. So any little thing we really did, it was like you can't do that. But I gotta sleep on your couch. I want to go home to my bed.
Right. Well, lack of information, lack of knowledge, lack of, the different systems working together. For sure. So I have one last question, and then we're going to move into the next section of the presentation. So last question for you at this point is you alluded to KYA and to um, to reform Louisville as a couple of agencies that you worked with. What resources did you utilize, or what would have benefited you if it had existed? Like, what community support would have been helpful to you at the time, or is helpful to you now?
I would say like transportation, like as a 11, 12-year-old, catching the bus by herself, getting to work, getting to school, and then also having the responsibility of two other siblings. Really just like a case manager just to explain, not even a case manager, it could have been, somebody from the jail system sitting down with the family, just explaining what was going on. Visitations. Like I said, I talked to my mom one time. I didn't even get to see her until she got out. Uh, yeah, just really explaining it to me. I would have probably would have understood more, and I could have explained to my younger siblings,
Yeah.
me being the oldest.
Great. Thank you so much, Lee. We really appreciate you sharing your personal insight and experience with us. Can be very intimidating to tell your story, and we're just really grateful to you for being willing to share with us today. We are going to transition to the next segment of our presentation. A big part of our bounce ground rounds is to break out into our breakout groups. Each group will have a facilitator, and the facilitators are going to ask you, they have some talking points with regard to the information that we've heard this morning, first from Joe and Carol, and then just now from Lee. So we'll be sending you to your breakout groups, and then we'll be all coming back together to kind of do a share out with the larger group. So enjoy your small groups. Okay, everybody, we'll give everybody just a quick minute to get back, and then we still have a jam-packed 12 minutes here to share out, and then we're going to leave just a few minutes at the end. As we mentioned, there will be a call to action by Joe, and we have our evaluation that we're going to ask you to please stay on and complete, or else Bev will be very upset with us. So we will start as we've got folks joining back. I have a list of who our facilitators were, so I'm going to call on you all if I can just find that and pull that back up real quick. Give me 1 second. Okay, actually, speaking of Bev, and I don't know if Bev ended up being the facilitator in her group, but in Bev was. Okay, so Bev, really if everybody could take maybe 1 minute. We don't have a ton of time. We had 10 groups, I think. So, and like I said, we need to save time for Joe's call to action and Bev's survey. So if you could share just a couple highlights from what your group shared with each other, that would be great. So Bev, do you mind to start with your group?
No, I had a really great group. And one of the, let's see, so one of the things that was surprising that was mentioned, not so much of a surprise, but the whole thing that the contact with her mother, the limited access was just like, come on, we can do better kind of thing. Everybody agreed to that. The resources that could support families. We had a group in the chat from the Family Nurturing Center in Cincinnati and Florence, Kentucky, and they have a really neat operation where they kind of, I'm sorry, Beth, if I get this wrong, they kind of promote visitation between parents whose kids have been removed from them with them, but they also they're a source of they give resources out to the parents and support the needs that they have. But Beth mentioned they have a resource in the community called Open Access, where I hope I'm getting this right. People can go to the behavioral health center within a certain time frame, and they're allowed to sign up for services that they need. It's like it sounded like kind of like a one-stop shop for support services needed by the family. And they call it Open Access. So I don't know if we have anything like that here in Louisville, but I was really intrigued by that. And we had a person in our group from the State Department of Public Health when we talked about what can you do to combat inequities in trauma and ACEs. And so they work within the executive branch of the government, but they review all the legislation being proposed each session within an equity lens and write summaries and suggestions for the governor to consider when the governor is deciding whether to support or not support legislation moving forward. And I think, of course, that's really, really important. So we had some good discussion.
Great, thank you. I want to be mindful of the time, so I'm going to ask each remaining group to just share one thing. We do collect the notes and we'll send them out to everybody. So if I know you want to share all of your awesome ideas, but if everybody could just share one main point moving for the rest of the group, we're going to have Valerie's group go next. If Valerie wouldn't mind to share.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm going to break the rules and do two real quick, but I am fast. I would say one thing that really stood out, other than Lee's immense bravery, super appreciate everything that was shared, was really just being surprised or just noting the loss of the youth in that position, just knowing what was going on, knowing what to expect, knowing what was happening, and just really knowing that, like, in these roles, we need to be mindful of and support parents on having hard conversations. How do we provide age-appropriate information to youth and involve them? Because that impacts them through adulthood, as we can see today. It still impacts Lee. Something else that really stood out to me was when working with parents and families in these situations to focus on the present, because ACEs are something that all of us have, and it's not something to really dwell on or be deterministic for anybody, but really just to say, what can we do today in the power of now and the present?
Thank you, Valerie. Clarissa's group.
Yes. So the one thing I'll just pull from this is I think we all agreed on it's really important how we can all utilize our roles to combat inequities would be to meet people where they're at to ensure that they feel heard and seen and supported.
Thank you. Courtney?
Okay, so as far as like the reflections, I think one of the things that really stood out for us is just how we conceived of, you know, what could be traumatizing versus what maybe isn't as an adult. One of the people in our group kind of talked about how, you know, if a kid misses 9 days of school unexcused, it's this huge deal. But if there's a parent who is incarcerated for 9 days, you know, there's a lot of adults in their life who may feel like, oh, that's not as big of a deal. It's just 9 days, which really just spoke to a lot of those structural and systemic issues. And then the other thing when we were talking about how to combat those inequities, accessibility being really critical. You know, we talk a lot about like we know what the protective factors are, but there's also sometimes this onus or responsibility that's put on the parents or the caregivers to kind of seek those things out and walk themselves through it. So being really intentional about thinking about how accessible are the services for people, and like in our roles, what are the things that we can do to make that happen? And again, just, you know, constantly thinking about how can we help those parents and caregivers to kind of overcome some of those barriers.
Thank you, Courtney. Crystal's group?
Yes, so definitely we talked about ditto to the sentiments that everyone shared about Lee's testimony being amazing, and we appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing your story with us. You did a really great job as always. And then we also kind of talked about like within our roles and our agencies, what we can do, and definitely committing to being trauma-informed agencies, as well as educating people on how to educate themselves about being aware of these issues that are happening. And then also just pouring into pouring into ourselves so that we're able to show up for our clients as well.
All right, guys, hang in there with us. We got just a couple more. So Hannah's group?
So
Amber
offered to share for our group. Sure, yeah. So sorry, Kat, tail in the frame. So we talked a lot about you know, things that you all have already mentioned, being trauma informed, you know, making sure that we pour into our own cups, but so that we can help others. What we really focused on and shared were different resources. We noticed that you know, looking geographically, support is different from county to county, which is really interesting. But making sure that we kind of connect with different resources, and that can be the family resource officers within schools who are amazing. They can connect to the larger community. Here in Louisville, we just opened the Goodwill Opportunity Space in West Louisville, which has connections to the Legal Aid Society, career assistance, and what else do we have? You know, making sure that we have empathy for the circumstances of others, and you know, allowing that to really guide how we serve and help, also. And also having access to like local workforce initiatives, which we shared as a group. I'm guessing that some of these like resources will be shared out. So happy to provide that information. But having access to parenting classes and mental health resources and things like that is really important.
I'm going to, for Mara, Naomi, and Joe, if you all could, we've had a request to put we just have a couple minutes left. If you could put a couple highlights in the chat for all of us to see. I'm so sorry that we have come up so close to the end of time, but we do want to hear from Joe. Sorry, so that was just a couple Joes. Joe B, you're going to put your notes in the chat. Joe Cruz is going to give us a call to action, and then we'll do our evaluation.
Jacqueline, we get that all the time when Joe and I do trainings together. Joe, we call it the Joe and Joe show. So
Yes.
we typically are in tune with which Joe you're speaking
Okay.
of. But
Okay. I know you both knew. Yeah.
All right. So these are just other ways that we can build on our resilience and combat inequities. We want you to kind of take a look at this list. If there are things where you're kind of like, well, what does that mean? We're hoping that you will look it up. We would like to challenge you to educate yourselves, right? So if you're looking at these things, what are racial equity principles, right? Or what is radical hope? Look it up and educate yourself and learn about some of these things. But what we really hope is that you educate yourself about the things that you would like to learn more about. And then when you get information, that you educate others in your circle. We have a circle of influence and a circle of power, and we should be utilizing those circles. So educate self, educate others. And one of the biggest pieces is pouring into ourselves, like Crystal and a couple of other people said, pouring into our cups so that we can be our best version of ourselves and show up and be present when we come into spaces when we're serving people and working with different individuals. Carol, did you have anything to throw on to the end of that call to action?
You're good.
All right. Well, we want to thank you all again for coming out and listening to all of the information that you received today. A reminder that the good majority of the information that you received came from the collective. It didn't really come from us. We asked a lot of questions and you answered those questions. So we have that information. We have it amongst us. Jacqueline, to close it out.
Yes, you can see here we have the QR code. Gosh, I'm so old. That's a QR code, and we would love for you to utilize that to do the evaluation. We really, I promise you, take your feedback to heart. Bev does a great job analyzing the data for us, and we really do appreciate it. It really does inform us for future events. So thank you again to Joe and to Carol and to Lee for sharing, and to all of you for being here today. We're so grateful. Thank you to Aetna for sponsoring, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.